Okay. When you think about Singin' in the Rain,
Yeah.
what comes to mind?
I don't know about you, but
For me, it's got to be
Gene Kelly.
swinging from that lamppost
Yeah.
in the pouring rain. Just pure joy. It's iconic, right? But here's the thing, and this kind of blew my mind when I first read this. Back in 1952, when Singin' in the Rain came out, it wasn't exactly hailed as the masterpiece we see it as today.
It's true. I mean, some critics
Yeah.
didn't even think it was the best musical of that year.
Wild.
Yeah.
So how did a film that initially received, let's just say, mixed reviews, become so revered? How did it become like the go-to example of a movie musical?
Yeah.
That's what we're going to unpack today.
Absolutely. And to really dig into that, we got to explore... We're going to explore Gene Kelly's vision of sin dance.
Okay, sin dance. Now, there's a term I bet a lot of people haven't heard before.
Yeah, it's a good one.
But it's central to understanding what makes this film tick. And we've got some great stuff to help us do that today. Excerpts from The Atlantic, a deep focus film review I found super insightful, even some interesting background from, good old Wikipedia.
And to fully grasp, what makes this film so special, we almost have to, travel back in time a little bit. I mean, imagine Hollywood in the late 1920s. This is a period of just immense upheaval.
Right.
The shift from silent films to talkies.
Yeah, total game changer.
It was not...
What a disruption.
It wasn't exactly a harmonious, song and dance routine.
You're telling me our Wikipedia source, and this is one of those things that always gets me, mentions John Gilbert. Huge, and I mean huge E-star in the silent era. But when talkies hit, his voice, let's just say it did not translate well. Considered way too high-pitched for this new world of talking pictures.
Yeah.
And just like that, poof, his career was pretty much over.
It really highlights how, the shift to sound wasn't just about the technology. It completely changed everything. How stories were told, how actors performed, even, I think, how audiences connected with stars on screen.
It's true. I mean, think about how much we associate an actor's voice with their persona, with, who they are.
Totally.
And Singin' in the Rain, it captures this whole chaotic, hilarious, and honestly, often kind of heartbreaking transition with such wit.
It does.
Take Lena Lamont's, now classic line, "I can't make love to a bush."
Chuckles. Oh, it's so good.
I mean, it's funny.
It's so good.
But it also gives us a glimpse into how absurd those early sound stages were.
Yeah.
With microphones hidden, in bushes and potted plants.
Right, all over the set.
Everywhere.
And what makes it even funnier, to me at least, is that, Singin' in the Rain, it's just packed with these little nods to real events and real people from that era.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
It's like we're getting a behind-the-scenes look at old Hollywood with all its quirks and growing pains.
Yeah, we can't talk about Singin' in the Rain without talking about the man, the legend, Gene Kelly.
Absolutely not.
Because he wasn't just a song and dance man. I mean, he was so much more than that.
Yeah, he really was.
He was deeply passionate about elevating dance, bringing this whole new level of, artistry and athleticism to the screen.
Right, and I think that's where his whole vision of sin dance really comes into play.
Okay, so we keep saying sin dance, but for the folks out there who maybe haven't encountered that term before, what exactly did Kelly mean by sin dance?
So it was really his way of saying that dance in film, it shouldn't just be what you see on stage,
Right.
It's not just recording a stage performance. The camera could be a partner in this whole thing.
Oh, interesting.
A storyteller.
I like that.
Yeah, so Kelly wanted to use these long takes, close-ups, dynamic camera angles to really draw the audience into the dance, to make you feel every single movement in a way that you couldn't necessarily on stage.
And you see that vision come to life in, some of the most memorable scenes, not just in movie musical history, but in cinematic history, period. I'm talking, of course, about the Singin' in the Rain sequence itself.
Oh, of course.
I mean, Dawn splashing through puddles, swinging from that lamppost.
It's joyful.
It's pure joy.
Yeah.
But there's also this technical mastery there that just blows me away every time I watch it.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what's so amazing about this film. It's that combination, right? The emotional resonance and then this technical, brilliance, and you can't have one without the other. Think about the placement of that sequence, right?
Yeah.
It's not just some random, oh, hey, let's sing in the rain.
Right.
It comes after Don has had this creative breakthrough. He's realized he's in love with Kathy. And it's like this physical manifestation of that emotional state.
So the rain becomes like a metaphor, almost
Yeah.
washing away his worries, his doubts. It's brilliant how Kelly does that.
And let's not forget, like, the sheer athleticism of Kelly's performance, especially considering he choreographed these sequences as well.
Oh, and by the way, fun fact, he filmed that entire sequence with a fever.
Oh, no. Stop.
I know. Talk about dedication.
Talk about a trooper.
And speaking of, like, impressive physical feats, we have to talk about Donald O'Connor in Make 'Em Laugh.
Oh, my gosh.
The way he uses his whole body, his facial expressions, everything to create these hilarious, almost impossible movements. It's like watching a live-action cartoon.
He's unbelievable. And the fact that they filmed a lot of those sequences in those long takes
Oh, yeah.
with minimal editing, I mean, you really get a sense of just the raw energy and impeccable timing involved.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that, things that seem effortless on screen, there's usually a ton of work behind them.
So much work.
And then you have a sequence like Moses Supposes, which is pure comedic absurdity, like two grown men in bathrobes stumbling over diction exercises.
They're good.
But even in those moments of like pure silliness, the film is also making this really clever commentary about Hollywood's obsession with like proper speech.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Like everyone had to sound a certain way.
And I think that's what makes Singin' in the Rain so brilliant. It's this really amazing blend of like laugh out loud moments and then these really astute observations about the film industry.
Right. Okay, let's shift gears for a sec and talk about a sequence that has a totally different tone. The Broadway Melody Ballet. Now, this one is visually stunning, dreamlike, almost surreal.
Oh, yeah.
How does this one fit into the whole sin dance approach? Because it feels different.
It does, and that's what's so interesting about it. So remember, in the film, Don is pitching this idea for a musical called The Dancing Cavalier.
Right.
Right. And the ballet isn't just like a random interlude. It's actually a visualization of his pitch.
Oh, so he's like showing, not just telling.
Exactly.
Ew.
It's his way of showing the studio head what a modern, like, innovative musical could look like.
It's like a mini movie musical within the movie itself. And we see the full spectrum of Kelly's vision there, right? Like
Yeah.
those big romantic, Gene and Sid moments.
Yeah.
But also those huge Busby Berkeley-esque ensemble numbers.
Exactly. It really runs the gambit. And, it's worth pointing out here that Kelly was drawing inspiration from some earlier ballet films like The Red Shoes, which had been a big hit a few years before Singin' in the Rain.
Are interesting. Okay, one last scene I want to touch on because I think it's so clever how they do this in the film.
Ugh.
The contrast between You Were Meant for Me
Yes.
and then that final scarf dance
Yeah.
in the Broadway melody sequence.
Yeah,
Because they both play with this idea of like artifice, but in really interesting ways.
they do.
So walk me through that a little bit.
Okay, so in You Were Meant for Me, you have Don almost deconstructing the illusion of Hollywood romance.
Okay.
Right, it's like he's showing Kathy and us, the audience, that it's all smoke and mirrors.
Okay.
The wind machine, the painted backdrop, the perfectly placed spotlight.
He's like letting us in on the secret, showing us how the sausage is made.
Totally.
But it's still incredibly romantic.
Right, because you have these genuine emotions underneath all of that.
It's like the film is acknowledging, as that one article we read put it, the fundamental dishonesty, I think they called it, of filmmaking,
Yes.
while also celebrating the magic that happens when all those elements come together.
Yes, and speaking of dishonesty.
We can't forget about Kathy dubbing for Lena.
Oh, right.
I mean, talk about your ultimate Hollywood facade.
The classic.
The voice doesn't match the face, and the real talent is like hidden in the shadows.
It's true, though, and it plays into that whole fundamental dishonesty thing we were just talking about. But here's the thing, right? Singin' in the Rain, it's not like it's condemning Hollywood for this, It's not saying, look at how fake everything is. It's more like I don't know.
A knowing wink.
Exactly. Like, we're all in on the joke here.
It's self-aware, right? Like
Yeah.
It's acknowledging the illusion, but also celebrating what that illusion can create, the feeling it can evoke.
Yes. And I think that kind of gets to the heart of why this film has become so beloved.
Because when it came out, like we said, it wasn't an instant classic. So what changed? How did we go from, hey, it's all right, to Singin' in the Rain, like the quintessential movie musical?
Well, one factor that scholars point to is the rise of auteur theory,
Okay, yeah. Auteur theory.
which really took off in film criticism in the 60s and 70s. And, with auteur theory, You start looking at films not just as, products of a studio system, but as expressions of a director's unique vision.
And with Singin' in the Rain, they saw Gene Kelly, right? His
Yeah.
style, his innovation, his deep, deep love and understanding of classic Hollywood.
Exactly. So it stopped being just a fun musical and became something more.
Elevated to a whole other level.
Right. And it got people thinking, like, how much does knowing about the filmmaking process, about the how, change our experience of the final product?
That's a great question. And I don't know if there's an easy answer.
Right. It's all subjective.
Yeah, but I think, for me at least, and maybe this is the nerd in me, but like understanding the technical stuff, the creative risks, the sheer amount of work that went into creating these magical moments, it makes me appreciate it even more.
I'm right there with you, I think.
It's like, when you watch a dance number and it's amazing,
Yeah.
but then you find out like, oh, they were doing that with, I don't know, a broken ankle or something.
Right. Or it was all done in one shot.
Exactly. It adds a whole other layer.
It changes how you see it.
So, as we wrap up our deep dive into Singin' in the Rain, I think if there's one thing I want our listeners to take away from this, it's this. The next time you watch a musical, any musical, really pay attention to how the sound and the image work together.
Yes. Don't just let it wash over you.
Think about the editing, the camera angles, even the placement of a prop, because all of that factors in.
It all means something.
And once you start noticing those details, it's like you unlock this whole other level of enjoyment.
Totally. You start to see the artistry and the craft, and I think that's really rewarding.
It is. And who knows, maybe it'll even inspire you to go out and, sing in the rain yourself.
Why not?
All right, that's it for a deep dive into Singin' in the Rain. We'll see you next time when we'll be exploring another fascinating film.